Hello, you're listening to Storytelling Saga, the podcast that shares stories. I'm your host, Allie, and this week I am celebrating the 25th anniversary of one of my all time favorite shows, South Park. I've talked about the show a few times already on this podcast. I first talked about the movie back in 2019 in celebration of its 20th anniversary, South Park Bigger, Longer, and Uncut. And then I discussed the South Park Christmas specials. Of course, that's how it all started, with the spirit of Christmas. And then I discussed the South Park Goth Kids. And I've been wanting to revisit the show. I have thought about other themed episodes I could do, like Kyle versus Cartman episodes I could discuss, or just some of my personal favorite episodes of the show. I also thought about talking about my favorite songs from the series. And then I figured, the 25th anniversary is coming up. Perfect time to just discuss the show in general. And I've been watching this show since back in 2004. I was in 8th grade. I remember two of my friends telling me about the series, like one of them going in depth with episodes, and the other one telling me about the characters and like the crudeness of the animation and stuff like that, and I just knew I had to check out the show. The first episode I watched was Kenny Dies, so I always have the memory of Cartman, like, oh, you're breaking my balls, man, you're breaking my balls, like that shit. So, and at the time I remember watching it and knowing like that's around the time I started getting into adult animation, because earlier that same year I had started watching Family Guy, and I remember watching that with my cousins and all of us laughing our asses off at that. So with South Park, I knew like going into it that it's not for kids. Like I knew about the crassness of it, the filthy language, and that it's hilarious though. And I had the only thing I knew about South Park before watching it, before my friends telling me about it, is that I remember seeing the South Park Bigger, Longer, and Uncut DVD at one point, like in a Target, and I was like, oh, what the hell is this? Like, I know, I just remember like being intrigued by that, with like the so many characters on the cover of that DVD, and my first it's hard to remember, like so long ago, 18 years ago, but my first impression, I think, was that some things went over my head even then as a 13-year-old, because with that episode in particular, the episode Kenny Dies, it's about the whole thing with, as the title says, Kenny Dies, which he does at that point in like every episode of the series from that point, but not every episode, but for the vast majority of them. But in that one, it's all about Cartman wanting to use stem cells to like clone his own Shakey's pizza, so then he uses the whole thing with, oh, these could save my friend's life, like using that guise of, oh, I want to save Kenny, but then it turns out he just wants to make his own Shakey's pizza. So then Kyle kicks his ass in the end because he's like a fucking dipshit as always. So like then when he dies, and like the whole thing was like they kept him dead for a season, then they ended up bringing him back, but that was like supposed to be a more serious thing of Kenny dying and Kyle comforting Cartman. And so like getting a feel of all these character dynamics, and I remember I used to get Stan and Kyle confused because like they seemed so similar to me, and Matt and Trey have said that themselves, like, oh, Stan and Kyle are very similar, and they are just little kid versions of themselves pretty much, because Matt and Trey, that's too is like when I fell in love with this show, when I started watching it all the time, and like really I loved the characters, and I got involved like with the fandom, but I really became such a big fan of Matt and Trey themselves. And that's when, like, as I got a little older, like when I was a teenager, I would seek out interviews with Matt and Trey. And I remember staying up late one night to see Matt and Trey on like one of those late night talk shows, and I just admired them so much, and I wanted to see more projects with them. Their old movie Basketball, which I talked about on the podcast as well, and Orgasmo, just like other projects that they have done. And then of course years later when they did The Book of Mormon, which I saw on Broadway back in 2013 with my cousin. And watching the South Park concert, which was phenomenal, and it actually made me tear up at one point, because by extension of loving this show, it's by extension loving Matt and Trey. And to me, being a fan of Matt and Trey all these years, like, though I'm just a fan of the series, I'm one of millions of fans, that I feel like I know Matt and Trey as people. I feel like I know their sense of humor, of course, through South Park, through the things they talk about on the series, like the subjects they talk about. And just also to me, it's like through interviews too, but also you just get the sense that like what you see is what you get with them. Like the way they are on interviews and things like that is how they are like in the writers room, like when they did like there's also that South Park 6 Days to Air documentary, which is fantastic too because it shows you like coming up with an idea for an episode and plotting it out, writing it, recording the animation, all the steps to it, how they do that in under a week. Again, incredible. So with them it just feels like in a sense, I know them, even though I know them as much as I can as a fan who has never actually met them in person. And I'm sure, honestly, if I ever meet them, I feel like I wouldn't be able to thoroughly articulate how much they've influenced me, my sense of humor, how much South Park means to me. Like I'm sure I could just be like a rambling fan and be like, oh, I love South Park so much, you guys are fucking amazing, I love you guys, like, you know, and they would be like, oh, that's like whatever. I just, you know, it's like I would wish I could like, especially like Trey, like give him a hug and be like, thank you so much, you know, but like, oh my goodness, I would just love that. Gosh, I'm just like I'm just like picturing that now. That'd be amazing. But because Trey, especially like in that throughout that concert, he's of course the more sentimental one between the two of him and Matt. Like he's like, I want to thank my partner Matt, and then he surprised Matt with the band Rush, and like that was so sweet. And they're so like Matt was like that was just so sweet. Oh my god. So basically with that concert, I just found it so sweet that it was a celebration of the series, but it was also a celebration of their friendship, their partnership, and a celebration of them, like their hometown of Colorado, from where they met. That it goes back to just the two of them wanting to make each other laugh. And I think that's a really beautiful, beautiful thing that this partnership, like, look at what they built together and you know, 30 plus years of friendship. I think that's really incredible. And so I love that they're still going strong with this series, that they still care so much. And I just admire them so much. And like, I'm just gushing because I really do. Like, I love them so much. I really, really, truly respect and admire them. Their talent, their like, guts, they're like just like fuck you, like, you know, like just the way they are, like just their sense of humor. And South Park, by extension, that's what South Park means to me. It's like I love these characters, I love the humor. And what's funny is that I recently took my first ever solo trip, and it was a true joy. I recommend taking a solo trip if you haven't, just for whatever business or pleasure, whatever it may be, but preferably for your own time, like a vacation, you know, because it was so much fun. It was wonderful. It was also much needed. I needed a vacation, but that's why this episode is late, to be honest. I just needed a break. But while I was in my hotel, like getting ready for the day and stuff, Comedy Central was having a marathon of South Park, so I was watching it, and it's so funny because the show's been on so long that like they're showing episodes from so many different seasons, and just me watching them and remembering like, oh, I remember this episode I was in high school when this one came out, or like, oh, I remember at the time like quoting this one quote, like, you know, so many quotes from this one that we loved, like laughing our asses off at this joke. So it's just kind of like how it becomes a part of you, you know, like when it's something that's been around for so long. So truly it goes deeper for me than just a show that I love. It's in a sense a part of me, and that really means a lot to me. So again, like I just love Matt and Trey, and I have so much respect and admiration for everyone who works on the series and these characters. And like, even though the show has changed in certain ways, in a lot of ways it's still this like so similar with the, you know, like of course things have changed with them and their personal lives too, but like how just the sense of humor and like the crassness that has always been there since the very beginning, but also like the biting social commentary and the things like that they just cut right to the core of, like, look how fucked up this shit is, like just stuff like that, with so much stuff that they've talked about in all these episodes, in episodes that have gotten banned over the years, which is crazy, in episodes where they had to say like, we still stand by this. There's never been an episode that we didn't have to, like, we always stand by everything we put out there. And then, like, them reflecting on all of that, and just, like, the celebration of the show with the concert. And I was just singing along to all the songs. Like, it's fantastic how they did so many songs from the movie and from so many episodes of the series. Truly such a joy. So it really is amazing to know how big of an impact things like just a silly show, like, you know, when it boils down to it, a fucking hilarious cartoon, you know, adult animated series, how big of an impact it can have, and how it can just be so meaningful. And again, I can't say that enough, how much I love Matt and Trey. And to be honest, I'm just kind of, in terms of this episode specifically, I'm just kind of winging it. I guess I'm just talking about my love of the show in general, but I mean, because I could talk about, like, certain episodes, like my all-time favorites, things like that, but just generally speaking, because with this show, like, as I was, like, when I was younger, growing up watching this show, I was, like, so invested in the fandom in terms of writing on the message boards back in the day. I've written also so much South Park fan fiction throughout the years. It's just, like, so funny, like, looking back on that now and just, like, reflecting on that a bit, with, like, so much stuff that's out there with the fans. There's so much great fan art. So, like, it's so wonderful. Even, like, just seeing the fans at the concert when they just show a little bit of that, of fans dressed up and stuff. There were two people dressed up the way Matt and Trey in gowns that they did when they went to the Oscars, and saying the exact same thing. Oh, it's such a magical night. I was like, fuck yeah, that's fantastic. You guys did that. So, oh my God, it would have been so cool to be at that concert. I just imagine it reeked of weed. I'm sure it was just such a fucking amazing once in a lifetime occurrence. Like I felt all that energy just watching it on TV, so I can only imagine how incredible it must have been being there at that concert, because my goodness. So just feeling all of that love for the series, and between Matt and Trey, and for their crew and everyone who works on the show, and for the fans, of course. So I think that's all absolutely beautiful. And then, of course, like, you know, the fact that you have all this beauty with this show, with all the fucks and shits and everything, and the super disgusting, everything about it. Because, you know, for me personally, with all of, like, kind of the gross out stuff throughout the show, I've more or less become so immune to it. Even with, like, other adult animated series, anything that kind of, like, lowbrow humor, you know what I mean? That it's kind of like you're so used to it, and, like, all the swearing, it's just kind of its second nature now. There's nothing that's truly shocking anymore. It's nothing like, holy shit, I can't believe they said that or showed that. It's just kind of like, yeah, that's South Park for you. We expect that edginess from it. And that's been years and years from that. Like, even in the early 2000s when I started watching it, I was like, okay, like, once you get used to it, it's just like, oh, all right, this is what it is. And it would always make me laugh, and just, like, from the very beginning as a little teenager watching it, like, oh my goodness, it's crazy how long it's been, and it makes me so happy that they still love making the show. It truly makes me so happy, because, you know, when people are kind of phoning it in, or when eventually they want to go on to other projects, which of course is understandable, but I love that they still love doing it. And that they are able to still do other projects too when the time is right, because I know they had mentioned they were going to do a movie before, and, like, right when the pandemic hit, then it wouldn't have been as timely anymore with that movie specifically. So who knows where that is headed. But they've had so much with South Park lately too, with, like, the specials on Paramount Plus and everything. And so I'm just happy that it's still going strong, and I look forward to more, because I can always count on this show for a laugh, and that just makes me so happy. Even though, of course, in my opinion, like with any show and that goes on so long, kind of the more iconic moments are from earlier seasons, and, like, though it's still a fantastic, amazing show that's really smart with the writing and everything, that there's, again, it's just like, okay, well, what do they have to say about this? It's like you come to expect from them, okay, like, you know, of course they're going to talk about the pandemic and, like, any major huge thing going on in the world, you know that they're going to address it. And looking back, though, on iconic stuff, like, of course, Scott Tenorman Must Die, how that was, like, a game-changing episode for Cartman in particular, how he became this fucking sociopath by killing Scott Tenorman's... No, he didn't kill them. Pardon me. He had the, like, tricking the guy into shooting and killing them, and he ground them up into chili. And then years later, which was such a great reveal to me to this day, one of my favorite moments in the series, when we find out that Scott Tenorman's dad turned out to also be Cartman's dad. Fucking amazing reveal. One of those things where, because the longer you wait for a reveal for something like that, the more satisfying it has to be, and man, did they nail it with that. So then it turns out that they were half brothers all along. Oh my god, I love that. And just like so many funny things, of course, like taco flavored kisses. How can you not love that? How can you not love the whole dynamic between Cartman and Butters, when Cartman thinks he died and then, like, Butters thinks he's a ghost. Like, I thought you were a ghost, whatever. And, like, oh god, I thought you were one. I can't do a Butters. Let me actually try to do Butters' voice. Lou, 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 I got some apples. Lou, 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 you got some too? I can't really, like, do the accent. Jesus, that was terrible. But whatever, fuck it. So, it's too funny. Oh my god. Butters is such a... To me, like, he's such a popular character, of course. I mean, you got Professor Chaos. He hasn't been around in a bit. Besides Victor Chaos. Victor Chaos, you know, Butters as an adult. But I miss Professor Chaos. I hope we'll see him again. I miss Mr. Hanky. There was that whole thing where he left South Park because making fun of the whole thing with Apu from The Simpsons. You know, Simpsons did it. There's so much. Oh my goodness. But... you know, for me, to be honest, just to zero in on one character instead of me just, like, talking about rambling on about different moments, but with Butters in particular, he's a character that I wasn't crazy about at first because I didn't like that he replaced Kenny, but I like Butters as a character because I love the innocence to him, like the real, true innocence and naivety, and I love the dynamic between him and Cartman, how Cartman is able to manipulate him so fucking easily. But then also things where Butters knows how Cartman is. For instance, the episode when they have the Christian rock band with Butters, Cartman, and Token. And then when Cartman says, oh, may God strike me down if I'm lying, or something, like whatever he talks about. And then Butters is like, ooh, like, let me get out of here because this is trouble. Like, just stuff like that, where he, like, knows how Cartman is. Or just, like, also the purity of him. That episode in Super Fun Time when, like, he won't let go of Cartman's hands. Like, he's like, no, I'm not going to break this one rule. Like, you know. So the whole time he's holding his hand because, like, they're buddies, so he doesn't want to get in trouble as, like, his partner. Oh my god, it's too funny. Or like when he gives Cartman his comeuppance, which has happened a lot too. So like that dynamic is fantastic. And again, in The Death of Eric Cartman, when he thinks Cartman is a ghost, it's just so hilarious. And in the episode Cartman Sucks, when Cartman like thinks he pranked Butters, but like it's so stupid. Oh my god, and then Butters has to go to conversion camp and it's just so ridiculous. Like, well, now I am confused. Like, he doesn't really understand any of it because he's just, again, like, just so naive and everything. Like, he's just like such a real sweetheart deep down though too. And even though like there's that episode with Paris Hilton, like when, like, oh god, that stupid spoiled tour video playset episode, that's so funny. Oh my god, so many great. There's that whole episode just about Butters. Like, it's Butters' very own episode, where it's like they did that song in the concert, they did the Robot Friend song in the concert. It's too funny. Oh goodness. Just seeing glimpses of Matt and Trey as their characters, like, you know, Matt as Butters and Trey as Cartman, like, it's so good. I can't. When they sing the theme song too at the concert with Primus and like giving an origin of the theme song, like they had the special microphone set up so they could have the pitched up voices. Just any like glimpses of getting to see stuff like that makes me so happy. Like any little behind the scenes thing that they have shared throughout the years, I love all that. And I've shared that my favorite character of the series has changed throughout the years because my first favorite character was Kenny. And the reason I loved Kenny is because I just love the mystery to him, that the fact that his voice is always muffled when he speaks. I loved looking up the transcripts online and trying to find his dialogue to see like the filthy stuff he says, because his stuff is always disgusting because conveniently you can't fully understand him, so they don't need to censor it at all. So he says such over the top crass sexual things. And even in his like lyrics in the theme song have changed throughout the years, and like all of that, super raunchy. And so I also just felt bad for him because he would always die, so I liked that gimmick though, like of him always dying and just miraculously coming back to life every episode. And I also loved then the reveal of years later when they did Mysterion and it turned out to be Kenny. I loved that too. That made me so happy. I was like, oh, good, something for Kenny to do, because after a while they kind of made Kenny in a way secondary to Butters, which is why I wasn't always crazy about Butters, even though still though at the core are these four boys: Stan, Kyle, Kenny, and Cartman. And even like, with Kenny, like one of the best episodes, which is won an Emmy, was Best Friends Forever, when Kenny like playing the PSP and like in heaven, and like they're doing the whole thing, talking about the whole thing with Terry is that her name? I'm blanking in this moment, but like with the staying on life support thing, Terry Schiavo. Over time it was topical because again, turn around an episode so fast, so being very topical with things like that. And he is kind of an underdog in a way too, which is why I love Kenny, because he's poor, so Cartman always rips on him for that. But then he's like also just a huge perv, obviously, and the fact that we never really fully see him without his hood except in the movie, which I think is great. When he's like in the series, when he's without his hood, it's still like partially obstructed in some way, his face. Like in the baseball episode, which I had recently rewatched during that marathon of South Park, The Losing Edge. Like you just see like his blonde hair and like the hat though. That one's so funny too, because like they just want to lose at baseball, but then they keep winning. And then Randy like seems so proud of Stan, but he's just like proud that he's gonna fight parents at the game. He's such a fucking idiot. Randy is one of those characters who has changed a lot too, because he really started, he was just a geologist, and he's just more or less a straight man, like as an adult version of Stan, more or less. And then he got increasingly like goofy and ridiculous over the years, and then every once in a while a great Randy episode, which is great. And then obviously in recent seasons, I mean, he went full on Karen in the most recent episodes, but in more recent seasons, he had the whole weed for integrity weed. So he's so funny too, of course. One of the controversial episodes with him was that Bloody Mary episode, which there was like problems with the Catholic Church with that episode. Ridiculous. Obviously, so much controversy with episodes over the years. A big one being Trapped in the Closet, making fun of Scientology. And like it even ended with all the credits of John Smith, Jane Smith. They didn't want to have a lawsuit against them, so that's really crazy. Obviously 201 was pulled because again, going back to the whole thing with Muhammad, and also the episode, I think it's called Super Best Friends, I think that's what it's called, back in season 5, with again showing Muhammad. And there's been a couple others ones. So there's also controversy with that episode with Jared has AIDS, because ending with Butters supposedly getting beat up or something. And there was other controversial ones too. That's just some of the more ones that were either banned or just like, because like 201 specifically aired only once and then never again. And then even on the DVD, I remember it's like they censored all of Kyle's speech. Fucking crazy. So like with all the controversy the series has had though, like you need that edgy humor. And again, it all goes back to satire. That's the thing. Like, it's still at the end of the day, it's a cartoon. It's there to make you laugh. And that goes back to like the series itself. Like originally the series would always kind of make fun of those saccharine things, with one of the boys saying, I learned something today, and like saying a whole speech. And like that was more of the formula early on, those really early seasons of the series. And then like again with Kenny dying and with Cartman saying, screw you guys, I'm going home. Like it was more so like it had like its formula, it had like its certain beats. Then obviously, though it still was always satirical, then as the series progressed, with them being able to turn around episodes so fast, being able to tackle timely issues, that then kind of put it in a time capsule of, oh, this is like what's relevant at that time. So like looking back on old episodes of like, again, like early 2000s with 9/11 and like all these things that were relevant in the news, and then of course in 2020 with the pandemic, like all these things that when you look back on, it's like, oh, this was going on in the news at this time. And so with all of that though, still Matt and Trey have said that their favorite episodes have still to this day always the episodes of the boys just being boys, like those more evergreen episodes that aren't like on these topical things of whether it's religion, whether it's politics, whether it's controversial shit going on in the news, whether it's stuff with celebrities. And so I love the mix of all of that, though, of them just sometimes parodying dumb shit with movies, sometimes just like tackling heavy topics. And my favorite episodes have always been like the ones that are more so those type of episodes too, like the boys being boys episodes. Like one of my favorites is Good Times with Weapons, and that one still though was topical at the time because they were parodying the whole thing with the Janet Jackson boob reveal, you know, the boob slip up during the Super Bowl halftime with Justin Timberlake, so like they were parodying that at the time. But then it's also parodying anime, and I love that fucking song Let's Fighting Love. Trey sang that during the concert, like so amazing. Again, so talented. Him playing at the piano, I loved that. And then Matt on the drums, Matt with the guitar. I can't, like, they're so fucking talented. Like, oh gosh. But like, you know, Trey saying, never would I imagine I would get to sit down here and sing "Shut your fucking face, Uncle Fucker." Like, oh my god, that filled me with such pure joy. And then later on, him singing, like, Gay Fish, like, oh, come on. And also them having, like, the whole Lemmy Winks thing. I love all of it. And singing Montage, we're gonna need a montage. And then doing their encore of America, fuck yeah. You know, America War Police. I gotta talk about that at some point too. I didn't see that in theaters, but because I was, you know, that's when that movie came out, 2004, when I started watching South Park. But again, hilarious. But so, like, so many great things in this show. Oh my goodness. And then of course, like with Stan and Kyle, them being best friends. And then at one point, so like after Kenny was my favorite character, and he's still, you know, to be honest, like I like love them all for different reasons, so it's like hard to say my all-time favorite character. But so then after Kenny, then like my focus for some reason shifted on Stan as my favorite character, because I love that he was like the most quote-unquote normal of the entire group, whatever normal is within fucking this crazy world of South Park. Him really just being like the straight man of it all. And one of my favorite Stan episodes is like the Vote or Die episode with him, like him not wanting to vote, and like that whole thing with Diddy at the time, you know, well, they called him, like, he was Puff Daddy, now he's Diddy, P Diddy, you know. And a lot of Stan episodes basically just him not wanting to get on board with whatever crazy shit is going on. Like in the Trapped in the Closet episode, like him doing that, like the, you know, the meter like that test that they do, or in You're Getting Old, when like he's like suffering this like crisis of like getting older and finding everything turning shitty and stuff, or him not wanting to be on the Facebook trends, like all stuff like that, like just like fuck this, I'm not doing it, just, you know. So him not wanting to like be on board with whatever crazy shit's going on. And then of course you got Kyle, with Kyle too just being so self-righteous, which makes him such a good foil for Cartman. So still to this day, my all-time favorite dynamic on this series is between Kyle and Cartman, because so many iconic moments between the two of them, like Cartman trying to kill Kyle with a wiffle bat, the Passion of the Jew episode when like Kyle says like, you won, like you were right all along, like so ridiculous. And of course Cartoon Wars, fucking amazing, them arguing over Family Guy, and then going back to Kyle giving his speeches, and then like Cartman say, like, you know, them fighting over that, like Kyle basically saying either all of it's okay or none of it's okay, to make fun of certain things, and that like goes back to the show itself, like that meta humor there, the meta humor of that. And then there's so many. The Le Petit Tourette, which is a great one too, because though, you know, Kyle is right that somehow, despite Cartman being a little shit, he gets his comeuppance actually getting Tourette's, and then like it works out for him in the end when Kyle inadvertently saves him from embarrassing himself. So ridiculous. So again, like, even though like, you know, Kyle is right, that's still just for the sake of the joke that Cartman gets away with his bullshit. And the Man Bear Pig episode, which has like one of my favorite moments of Cartman getting right in his face, like, oh hey Kyle, how's it going? It's like, dude, get away from me. Sure, see you around. Like when he's right in front of his face and so up close on them, so stupid. And then of course also Imagination Land. I love that trilogy. That's one of my favorite like episodes in the series too, with him just wanting Kyle to suck his balls, and then it ends with imaginary Kyle sucking imaginary Cartman's balls. And that episode is so great too, because it's all about the importance of imaginary characters, and it's something that I feel goes back to this podcast in general too. That the whole speech Kyle says in that episode, that though these characters are fictional, they have more of an impact on our lives than some real people, and that they are going to live on for the rest of time. Like, that they have this impact, that though they aren't real, they have a real influence on people. That's a truly beautiful thing. And it's true that any fictional character, it's an amalgamation of artists, writers, directors, all these creative minds behind it. And then it becomes in the zeitgeist of fans saying, oh, I identify with this character. I love this character so much. Oh, this reminds me of my friends. Like, all of these things. So that just goes back to the beauty of storytelling and compelling characters, and why I love doing this podcast, and why I love writing, and why I love storytelling, and why I love television, and why I love, in particular, why I love South Park so much. So that's a beautiful thing to me. In terms of my all-time favorite episode of the series, my all-time favorite still to this day is The List. I love that episode. I remember watching it at the time being so fucking giddy through that episode. I think especially because it ended with Stan throwing up on Wendy, and I found that it was just like, it was a perfect callback, and then like they got back together, and it was very cute, and also just has the great moment with Cartman. Okay, Operation cannot possibly fail a second time. So we've learned a lot, primarily that girls do not have balls. Like, so stupid. And that episode, too, how it talks about the importance of character, and that, like, if being attractive isn't the most important thing in life, and also, like, beauty's in the eye of the beholder, as they say, but also it doesn't matter what you look like. It matters, like, what you do with your life and all of that stuff. And Kyle feeling insecure, and also the joke that they all look the same without, like, their hats and stuff, like, you know, so it's too funny. And again, that one was just like one of those evergreen, like, boys being boys, in that case, girls being girls episode. I love that one. So that one's still my favorite to this day. I love Imagination Land, as I said. I love Cartoon Wars, as I said. So many. I could, like, just sit here and start, like, gushing about different episodes. So Kenny Dies, to me, too, is still, like, a special episode to me, because the first one I watched. And it is really an emotional episode, too, with Cartman singing Heat of the Moment. And again, all the singing on this show. I mean, there's so many great singing, like, there's so many great songs. One of my favorites, too, is from The Ring, with the Jonas Brothers singing. I love that. Like, oh, I got a ring on my finger to remind me what I cannot do. I love Cartman singing, like, you know, Cartman sings so much. Oh my goodness. Like, you know, I love him singing, we're gonna make it right. No, I'm gonna make it right. I'm gonna take a little time to set things straight. Not faking it, making it right. Paying for my sins, and it sure feels great. Like, I love that in The Death of Eric Cartman. I love him singing, like, the songs, like, about Jesus, saying, like, he's in love with Jesus. So ridiculous. In that Christian Rock Hard episode, I love, like, the finger bang, 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 like, them singing that, how that came back years later with the band. I love that. Oh my goodness. There's so many. I love Safe Space. In my safe space, like, making fun of all that. Oh my god, I love that one. I can't, like, there's so many. I'm trying to just remember off the top of my head. There's so many, and I just, like, love them. I can't with how fucking great these songs are. I love also, like, the bullying song. We gotta make bullying kill itself. So ridiculous. I can't with that too. Oh gosh. So this show just means so much to me, and again, I could just keep gushing about episodes and songs and everything, you know, but all of that to say that it still makes me laugh so much. I love it so much. I love Matt and Trey. I can't wait for more South Park. Here's to the next 25 years. And with that, that is going to conclude this week's episode of Storytelling Saga. Be sure to visit storytellingsaga.com for all places to listen and where to follow on social media. And as always, feel free to send me any questions, comments, or writing prompts by emailing me at storytellingsaga@gmail.com. Next episode, if you listened to my previous episode when I discussed Helluva Boss, I mentioned that I was excited to get people who work on the show to interview them on the podcast. And with that being said, I'm so excited to say that I will be interviewing Sam Haft, songwriter for Helluva Boss. Until then, thank you for listening, and remember, write what you love.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm gonna jack it where the sun always shines. Well, Jack been spread the word, and now I've got to ease my mind. Been split those apple seeds, and while the apples grow, I'm gonna go jacking it, spanking it, spanking his back. Don't need no shirt, no, I'm gonna take my pants right off. Check on such a fine day, who needs underwear or socks? Been around God's country, there's one thing I know. There's no better place for jacking it than San Diego. Jacking it, jacking it, jacking it, jack. Spanking it, spanking it, spanking it, smack. Jacking it, jacking it, jacking it, jack. Jacking for the Lord. Hey, why not get down to San Diego? There's so much to see. From the warm tortillas of Old Town to the sparkling waters of Mission Bay. And when you're done sightseeing, why not try jacking it on one of their city streets? San Diego, come, take a load off. Jacking it, jacking it, jacking it, jack. Spanking it, spanking it, spanking it, smack. Wagging it, wagging it, wagging it, whack. Jerking it, jerking it, wagging it, whack. The cars are passing me by, they stop to say hello.
Hey, that guy's jacking
Out
it!
his window, there's a guy shooting video. When Jesus comes knocking on my door, just tell him I'm jacking it in San Diego. Jacking it, jacking it, jacking it, jack. Spanking it, spanking it, spanking it, smack. Wagging it, wagging it, wagging it, whack. Spanking it, spanking it, spanking it, smack. Jacking it, jacking it, jacking it, jack.